So, great news. I have a problem. Well, I have lots of problems. But this is a good problem to have because I get to make something fun. I need to make some storage for under the desk. Now, usually under a desk you'd put drawers or a cupboard, but where I've got electrics and access to my LEDs, and also it's in the corner and it's quite far back, it's going to be really hard for me to easily access the stuff stored at the back of this area. So you probably know what I'm going to do for storage, because you've read the thumbnail. Where I have a hard floor and the desk has no legs, it's going to be really easy for me to make a trolley that slides in and out. I'll be able to access all my electrics, and everything stored at the back I'll be able to access just by moving the trolley around. Now, to make it a bit more fun, I'm going to be making a false rock technique out of plaster like I've done with the rest of the office to keep the theme going. And for the first time since school, I'm going to give sewing a go because I want to make a curtain for in here too. So to get started, we're going to go with the finish, which is going to be the plaster wall. Now, the reason I'm doing the false plaster wall first is because it's going to take a few days to dry, and I've got work for a few days. And by the time I'm ready to paint, I'll be able to paint it straight away. Now, I'm going to go over the false rock technique with plaster in a bit more detail in this video because I feel like I know what I'm doing a bit more and a bit more confident to share the information. Now, a tip you'll get from a lot of carpenters is measure twice, cut once. Now, I wanted this to be 60 centimeters wide, but it's 61 centimeters wide. So I'm just going to change my dimensions to suit the wood. Measure once, cut 0. Here's another little tip for you. If you don't have a set square, use a saw. For the next cut, I don't have a table saw, so I'm going to screw some wood to the plywood and cut along that as a guide for the circular saw. Good news, I've got another problem. Now, this one's easier to solve because I recognised it earlier. So once I've plastered this, I'm going to need to screw it onto the structure for the trolley, and I'm going to be able to see the screws. But if I screw it onto the structure first and then plaster over the screws, you won't be able to see them. The only problem I have now is I don't have the structure of the trolley yet, and I want to get this done while the sun is out. So all I'm going to do for now is attach some battens to the back, screw them on, and then plaster it, and hopefully it will line up when I try putting it all together for the final trolley structure. Now, for the wheels of the trolley, I'm going to be using these caster wheels. Now, I actually got these for free because I found them attached to the bottom of a desk in a skip. So I went back later on with a drill and I took them off because I like free things.
And this video is free, so if you like free things too, why not hit that like button?
And there we go. See, that fits beautifully in place. Okay, so I've put the back on there. This should be easy enough to attach some shelves to. I've also added a side because I'm going to want to go around the corner with the plaster and the rock effect. And you can see I've got the screws on. So they're all going to be hidden by the plaster. So the next step is to cut some insulation board to make it look like rocks.
So using the insulation board is optional. If you don't want a lot of depth to your rock wall, you won't need it at all. But you can even get away without using it if you do want a bit of depth, just by using more plaster. The insulation board I have left from the office build was 80mm. This was way too thick, which is why I've cut it down, so if you're buying it especially for the project, I'd recommend getting something thinner. Now, I can't tell you what a rock shape is or what it looks like, but when you're looking at a rock wall, it usually has a direction and some layers. So I just beared this in mind when I was putting it together, trying to make sure everything had a flow. And usually I would stick it on with expanding foam. It sticks down really well and it would be way better than the screws I'm using here. However, I couldn't find my expanding foam and just wanted to crack on. So I decided to get some screws and screw them in until I felt it bite into the wood.
Okay, so I've laid this all out with like a direction that way. So it should look more rock-like, hopefully. Next step is to make it a bit tacky. To do that, I'm going to use this interior PVA glue. So now it's probably a good idea to put the PVA glue on with a paintbrush, but I'm using some underlay because it's going to ruin the paintbrush. It'll ruin the underlay too, but I don't care about this piece. And this is just going to help the plaster stick to the board. It would have been way better with a paintbrush. But I'm going to leave this now until it's tacky to touch. It's slippery at the moment. So I'll be back in about 20 to 40 minutes to see how it's getting on.
And on this point, I didn't set the microphone up properly, so I didn't record the sound. but I felt the PVA glue, it felt a bit tacky, so I decided to crack on. I added some water to a bucket. Usually you'd want a clean bucket, but because I'm going for a rock effect, I'm not terribly worried if there's any lumps or bumps in there. Next, I added the plaster. This is multi-finish plaster. You should be able to get it from any hardware store, and brand new, this bag would have cost about £10. I've only got about halfway through it, so it does go quite a long way when you're doing a wall. I'm using the paddle mixer on my drill to give it a mix, and I want to get it so it's about the consistency of sour cream. You can see here it is way too dry and it looks very crumbly, so we're going to add water. And at this point I really wish I'd put my old jeans on. So I kept mixing until I got this kind of consistency. It should stick to the trowel pretty well, and if you've got any bits hanging off, it should sway around a bit with gravity and eventually fall. If you find your mix is too wet and you've gone too far, you can add some more plaster and this will help it dry out. Just a word of warning, it will change very quickly from too dry to too wet, so be careful when you get to this point. Now for the first stage of putting the plaster on, you can literally just slop it on and spread it around. And once it's started to dry, we can come back and then add some more detail. But even at this stage, I am still trying to go with the flow and spread it on in the direction I want the rock to go. The most important thing is to get it on because it will start to dry out after about half hour to 40 minutes. Something I haven't done, which is probably recommended, is putting some mesh or some fibres in with the plaster. Not doing this means it may crack a little, but I'm not bothered about that because we're going for a rock effect and rocks crack. This is how I got mine looking after the first layer of plaster.
Okay, so it's been about 1 hour. We can see it's got a bit of cracking in there. That's because I haven't put any mesh or any fibres in there. I'm not terribly worried because I want a rock effect. We can see like you can move it, but and it's still quite firm. So I'm going to add another layer, and this one is going to be a bit more detailed.
A little tip is to have a bucket with water in so you can quickly rinse your paddle off once you're done. You do not want to be trying to get the plaster off once it has set. Just make sure you remove all the other tools out before you turn it on. Okay, so for me, adding the details is the fun part for this build. So what I'm doing here is I'm just adding more plaster on top. This will be slightly smoother than the bit underneath, and what I can do is where I want there to be any bigger lumps or bumps, I can just add more plaster and smooth that over. You can see for all of this, I'm still adding the plaster in the same direction, trying to get the flow in the rocks. I'm using a plaster spatula to do this, and where the rocks are a bit thinner in the middle, I've used a smaller spatula.
So I've got it to this stage. I'm going to wait for it to get a bit drier, and I'm going to smooth it over, get rid of any harsh marks that I don't want, and then I can also start carving in to the plaster when again it gets even drier still. I'm just using a rough brush to put in some little details. I'm going to smooth them over a bit later on so they won't be quite so distinct. Okay, so it's a bit firmer now, so I'm going to smooth out all of the bits that I don't like that look a bit harsh. I don't know if it's recommended, but I'm also going to use a bit of water to smooth out where I need to as well.
So after about another 40 minutes, I was ready to get out this knife. Now this isn't any special type of knife, I just accidentally broke the end off when I was trying to cut through some frozen ice cream. But what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to sharpen up all the edges, I'm cutting off any blobs, and it's quite flaky and quite crumbly now, so you can actually dig in, get some straight lines, and this is where the rock really starts to take shape. Something that I found worked really well is if you're near the edge of the rock, you can use the knife to scrape in another layer. Adding a layer just gives it a bit more depth and really starts to make it look a bit more realistic. And something that I found was useful when you got to the edge of the rock was to add in more layers just by carving in lines with the edge of the knife. Now when I did it like this, I actually thought it looked pretty bad. So I decided to use the existing lines as a guide, and then I really dug the knife in deep and really gouged some chunks out. I also did some gouges going across the cracks just to give it a bit more character. This process did take quite a bit of time, but I really enjoyed it because this is when it really starts to take shape. So now I need to leave that for about 4 days and it will start to look like this. Ideally, you want it all to be that white colour, but for the first layer of paint, I'm going to give it a go and see if I can give it a nice coating. Now for the first layer, I'm going to be using an emulsion paint. This is a dark grey, this particular one was called Urban Nights. So whenever you're painting on dry plaster, it's always a good idea to mix 50-50 water and paint. This is called a mist layer and it will really soak into the plaster. But I've also found that mixing the paint with water, even if you haven't got plaster, really helps it spread on easily and get into the cracks. Now being the first coat, it's really easy, you just want to slap it on and make sure you get everything completely covered. Next I've got this dark blue colour, this particular one is called Turkish Blue. And I'm going to mix it in with the first grey colour. Mixing in some different colours is just going to give it a more natural feel. And then I'm going to add it over the grey already there. I'm not going to cover all the grey, I'm just going to cover some of it. And it doesn't matter if the previous grey hasn't dried yet and it's still a bit wet, it will mix together in a different way. Once it was dry, it looked like this. It's quite difficult to see the blue, but I'm quite happy with that. If you wanted more blue, you could have just added more blue to the mixture.
Okay, now I've left that overnight because for this next technique, we need this to be completely dry. I'm going to be using this colour next, it's a lighter blue, and I'm going to be using a dry brush technique. So for this, we just put paint on the brush, and then we try to get the paint off the brush. And when it feels like there's hardly any paint on there, this is when we use it. I haven't actually done anything here, I don't know what's happened, maybe that's just been a bit scratched. But I'm going to try it on the side. I think that looks okay. And now I'm just going to lightly brush it on. And what this does is it picks out all the raised areas and just highlights them. So be careful not to overdo this, it could be very easily done. And if you do it really lightly and you don't like it, you can go over with another coat. But if you put too much on, you're going to have to repaint the whole thing and then go back over with the dry brush.
Now with the way the light's falling on the rocks, it's hard to see what's happening here, but I am adding more paint.
There we go, and that's pretty much it finished. Getting close and look at some of the details. So hopefully we've got what looks like rock. I'm happy with this. So it's not 100%, but it's definitely way better than I would have expected for my third attempt. And you can see that's really starting to bring those colours out now.
Okay, so it's time to finish the rest of the frame. So for this I'm just using 12mm ply, some 4x2, some 2x2 and some basic power tools. I'm painting with the urban grey again as I go along. And for some of the shelves I'm using some giant redwood to keep in theme with the office.
So I'm screwing a shelf in on the inside of the trolley and this has happened. That's not good.
There we go, good as new.
Okay, now when I put the trolley into place, you can see the shelves from the side, and I don't want to be able to see them. So I could make a wooden box or a door, but I thought I'd give sewing a try, and I'm going to put a curtain there. So what I've done is I've been on YouTube and watched lots of tutorials of women with flowery clothes making beautiful curtains for their houses. I've been onto Amazon, I've got some material, this was £8. I don't know if that was a good deal because I've never bought fabric before. I found one of these. If like me you've never seen one before, it's called an iron and it's used for flattening clothes and making folds. I've got this cute little pillow off my girlfriend with little pins in it. That's going to come in useful later. And I went to a boot sale and I bought this sewing machine for £2. This should hopefully really speed up the process. So what I'm going to do is measure the size I need the fabric to be. I'm going to make it slightly bigger so I can fold the top over to put a rod through to hold the curtain, and then make the sides and the bottom a bit longer too so I can fold them up and make them into a neat seam. And the second reason I'm making it slightly bigger is because if it all goes horribly wrong, I can possibly scrunch it up a little bit and you won't be able to see that the lines aren't straight.
Okay, I never thought I'd say those things. It's time to man it up a bit now. Okay, so I've folded all the edges in and done the seams, and now I've got a fairly squarish piece of fabric. Now it's not perfect, but I was never expecting to be. This is the first time I've tried this. But what I've got to do now, I've got this fairly neat square, is fold the top over, and this is where the curtain rod's going to go through.
And here is my curtain. It's basically a square piece of fabric, and it's got a little tube through here so I can feed a rod through, and it will work curtain-like, probably, hopefully. Now I've intentionally gone for an easy project to start learning to sew because I have no idea what I'm doing. So you can see the lines aren't completely straight. I haven't done an amazing job, but I'm still very happy with the result. It will still look quite smart when it's mounted under the trolley, and I don't think you'll notice the bad parts. And if I get better at sewing in the future, I can always swap it out for something I like a bit more.
Now I just need to think about the curtain rod. So what I want to do is measure the rough height that I want the curtain rod to be, which is here. And then I'm going to heat it at that very specific point until it starts to glow red. Now this is just a piece of a stainless steel rod, and it was part of my daughter's trampoline. My girl's friend told me to throw them away, but I've kept them for a few years because I knew I would need them at some point. So after a few minutes it's red hot, and I'm going to use some pliers to just bend it. There is no way I would have been able to do this before if it hadn't been super heated. And it's only going to bend at the exact point it was heated. Now I had that issue with my microphone, so I don't know what I'm saying here, but next I've got to find a way to attach it to the trolley.
So what I'm going to do is hope that this screw here is completely useless. This is a 6mm rod, so I'm going to drill a 6mm hole through here, cut the top of this off, and then I should be able to use a grub screw to attach this to it, and that way it will come on and off nice and easily. And down this end I'm going to use the same idea. To attach this nut I'm going to screw and glue this in place, but this time I checked to make sure the screw's not going to bust through the plywood. All I've had to do is just drill a hole through this nut thing. So this line here is where I want it to come out the table. I can then line it up with the tape on the drill bit. The £3.50 hacksaw is not doing anything to it. It's literally just scratching the surface. Hopefully this will do better. So I'm going to move my camera away for this bit to make sure the cutting wheel doesn't hit it in the face. It's hot. It's too tall. Perfect. This should hold the bar in place. So I guess this is it. So here it is in place. Now overall I'm really happy with this. The one thing I will say is I do think it looks a bit square. If I was to do it again, I'd make the stones come up at a weird angle and it would have more of a natural look to it. The other good thing about this trolley is I can also use it a bit like a drawer and put things on top too. But for me, the most important thing is I've learned something new. I've had an introduction to sewing, and I've also had the chance to refine my false wall technique. So I hope you learned something new and you give something like this a go. But if you just take one thing away from this video, it's don't ask yourself if you can, it's ask yourself how you can.
If you've enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that subscribe button. There's plenty more to doing here, and I've got loads of projects in mind.